have impacted me at that time. So, but I would have been happy to pay more taxes.
But why would anyone want to?
So, Sam Seder recently went on Patrick Bet-David's show. Yeah, that Patrick Bet-David, and things got pretty intense. He sat down with Patrick and his panel to talk about some big ideas, including this one, bringing back a 90% top marginal tax rate. And as you'd probably expect, Sam and Patrick didn't agree at all. The debate got heated. There were some strong words, and honestly, it made for some great clips. So in this video, I'm going to play a few moments from that discussion and jump in with my thoughts along the way. Let's check it out.
Money was so freaking cheap for so long that we have to pay a price for it. And now you're looking at the economy. It looked like everything was good, but a big part of it was fake, Sam. We had a lot of fake success the last few years.
Well, I mean, look, I'm just measuring on, again, the way I view things is what's going to make things better for the most amount of people. And in terms of like, you know, it being in favor of the capitalists, I would also change our tax policy. So, I mean, I would claw some of that back, quite a bit of it back.
What would you do?
I would return to the tax policy when we had the greatest, sort of the widest economic expansion shared by more people as a percentage of our population than any other time in this country, which was in the 50s and the 60s. And I would return to the tax rates more or less there. So your top tax rate at that time was 90% top marginal rate for every dollar over $470,000 you would earn. So that would be equivalent to around $3 million today. I think we should return to that type of tax.
You want it to go as high as 90% at the top marginal tax?
At the top marginal tax rate. So understand, like, that only kicks in with every dollar above $3 million.
I hear you. And yeah, I mean, that's the famous Reagan situation where I think it was anything over $200,000 at that point. This might have been in the 40s, that he would only do 2 movies a year because he'd get paid $100,000 per movie, and then he wouldn't even do a third movie because he would only get 10% of the revenue because he's like, fuck it, I'm not doing another movie.
Yeah.
So wouldn't that curb growth?
When Reagan started telling that story, yep. You know who he was working for when he started telling that story, right? He was going around, I think it was for working for GE, trying to convince people not to get Medicare for all. I mean, if Reagan could have gotten 3 movies or 5 movies, he would have done it. He was working with chimps. He would have been happy to do that for his career, believe me.
Honestly, Sam's completely right here. And to add to that, it's kind of wild. Ronald Reagan literally made a record back in the day warning people that Medicare would lead to socialism. Like, imagine that. A program that today almost everyone agrees is essential was once painted as some communist nightmare. And now Medicare is one of the most popular government programs in the country. The only people still trashing it are guys like Patrick Bet-David and these right-wing media types. But regular people, they get it. Even if they do think it's socialism, they're like, cool, I like it anyway.
With your money and just being wasteful. The government is clearly fucking wasteful. Where you are correct is that most retirees and most Americans do appreciate Social Security, do appreciate the entitlement programs that come with this country, whether it's Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, no doubt. But that doesn't mean the government is good at spending money. We're seeing that Social Security is about to go bankrupt.
The trust fund is going to be
the trust fund by 2023. And yes, I just had this conversation literally 2 days ago in DC where he kept using the word bankrupt. I said, what does that mean?
Who kept using that word?
This was
Which Republican used it?
It wasn't even a Republican. He was sort of a Social Security financial advisor, expertise type of guy. But I said, what do you keep saying bankrupt? Is that meaning that retirees will not be receiving benefits? He goes, no, they'll probably be slashed by 25%. You use 20, so we can, cut the baby in half here. But how familiar are you with the 3-legged stool of retirement?
Of course, yes.
Okay, so it used to be you had 3 avenues to retire. You had pensions, which do they even exist anymore for 90% of people?
More as a defined contribution than defined.
They're not very popular these days. I don't know how many people here have pensions. You have Social Security, which was never meant to be a retirement program. It was an insurance policy if you live too long, which basically Americans are now. Or you have your personal savings, which is the 401k. We can argue the merits of 401ks and Roth IRAs, what have you. But Social Security should not be keeping Americans afloat for 30 years of their life.
Well, that's the failure of the private industry, isn't it?
Why is it a failure of the private industry?
Well, I mean, Social Security is maintained. The idea that we're leaning on the government stool because the other two have failed. That's a function of private industry.
Isn't that a function of just the average person understanding how money works and saving money, investing and doing it properly, versus the government or institution?
60% of the country lives paycheck to paycheck. How are they supposed to save this money?
This right here is one of Sam's strongest points. No question. If someone's barely making enough to cover rent, food, gas, and childcare, how are they supposed to save anything? Like, seriously, you can't just tell people to save for retirement when every paycheck disappears by the end of the week. And let's be real. Most employers are going to pay the lowest wage they can get away with. That's just how it is. We've got millions of people in this country who can't even handle a $1,000 emergency, one car breakdown, or one medical bill, and they're screwed. So yeah, Sam nailed it here. You can't save when you've got nothing left to save.
Well, how are they spending their money, I guess, is the biggest question. How many people have credit card debt? How many people? You just said when you took out a mortgage, you said, I'm an actor. What was the rate? You're like, I don't fucking even know. You should know.
Well, I was making so much money that
I don't give a shit how much money you're making, Sam. You should know what your mortgage rate is.
But, I mean, I didn't remember what it was in 1998, but I mean, I know what it is now. But I mean, but I was making so much money, but I was making, I was in the top, I don't know if I was in the top 1% at that time, but probably pretty close.
So let me ask you a question.
And I was a single guy who had just gone from making, to $22,000 a year to all of a sudden making that.
How much were you making
in a week
at that point?
I mean, I was making a lot of money.
Now, how comfortable at that point would you have been paying 90% in taxes?
Sure.
So you actually want to pay 90% in tax?
No.
So this one guy on Patrick's show, I think his name's Adam Snick, he starts freaking out about Sam suggesting a 90% tax rate. But here's the thing. Nobody on that panel seems to understand. It's a marginal tax rate. That means you only pay 90% on the money you make above a certain amount. In this case, over $3 million. If you make $3.5 million, you're only getting hit with that rate on that last $500,000. You're not getting robbed. You're still filthy rich. And let's be real. If you can't live comfortably on $3 million a year, you've got other problems. Nobody making that kind of money is worried about rent or groceries. And here's what makes it even funnier. This isn't some crazy new idea. From 1944 all the way to the early 60s, the top marginal tax rate in the US was over 90%. In 1944, it was literally 94%. Then after that, through the 60s and 70s, it was still super high, around 70%. And guess what? That was the era that MAGA people claim they want to go back to. The golden age of America. It was when we built the strongest middle class in the world. We had the booming industry, affordable education, highways, housing, all of that. And we still had rich people. So no, high tax rates didn't destroy America. They helped build it. People didn't pack up and leave. They stayed, got rich, and still lived amazing lives. So when Patrick and his guys act like a 90% tax is some end of the world scenario, that's just dishonest.
Let's be clear. That? I think it should be 90% over for the every dollar you make over $3 million.
Yeah.
That would not have impacted me at that time. But I would have been happy to pay more taxes.
But why would anyone?
Man, Patrick just cracks up here like the whole thing's a joke, like full on clown mode. And then there's Vinny sitting there looking like his head's about to explode. You can tell they're not even trying to engage. They're just laughing because they don't have an actual response.
You know why I'm laughing? Because it's always let's tax the people a little richer than me. It's always let's tax the guys
it was
that
a lot richer. But I'm just going back.
If you're saying 20,
I'm just going back.
If you're saying 22 a week, you were making $1,098,000. That's a lot of money.
No. Well, it wasn't 20.
You said 22 a week. That's $1 million a year.
No. That was the year before. I mean,
but you're making money.
He said he made $22,000 in a year.
I was making a bunch of money. But I'm just going back to when we had the Great Compression, which was when we had the least wealth inequality in this country. Mm-hmm. We had the GDP was, consistent with where, on our trajectory, but it was spread out. It wasn't like this. Essentially,
Rob,
it was more spread out. It's called the Great Compression. And I'm just using that figure. I mean, look, if it's going to be 85% over 3 million or 85% over 4 million, I'm just basing it on what was the most successful economic era of this country.
Why not do 90% over $250,000?
I mean, if the numbers bear it out, I'm agnostic as to that. Again, I'm just pegging it on when we had the most success in this country in terms of our economy.
I appreciate that you're pointing out the success, but right now the top marginal tax rate federally is 37, 39. Okay, you do realize how shocking it is to say, all right, rather than go from 37 to 39, how about 40? How about 50?
How many?
You want to go to 90?
How many people do you assume? How many people do you assume would be touched by that tax? Would be implicated?
Top 1%. Look at this number right here. Share of total income taxes paid.
Less.
The top 1% in this country pay 42.3%. The bottom 50% only pay 2.3%. So 150 million people are paying nothing in taxes.
Right.
And you want to keep the 1% paying more and more.
I think it's actually even less than 1%, to be honest with you. I think we're talking about 0.05%.
Sure, but let's tax them even more.
I specifically want to make it illegal to be almost as wealthy as you. Not quite, but a little bit more. Like, I want to make it not illegal. You're not going to go to jail.
So nobody can be no billionaires. No billionaires in America.
Absolutely.
Sam,
100%.
Why? Don't you want America to be known for greatness, for innovation, for capitalism, for all the amazing things that we've done in this country?
My definition of
you want to go to like Nordic socialism.
My definition of greatness is different from yours.
For me, the biggest takeaway from all of this is that Sam isn't talking about some fantasy. He's literally pointing to a time in American history when we had super high taxes on the ultra rich, and it actually worked. The 40s, 50s, and 60s, that post-war period, it was one of the most successful economic eras in U.S. history. We had innovation, we had strong unions, we had real upward mobility, and yes, we had a top tax rate of 90% for the wealthiest people. And guess what? The rich were still rich. They had like yachts, mansions, private jets, all of it. Like, they just weren't hoarding hundreds of billions of dollars while the rest of the country struggled. What Sam is saying isn't radical. It's a return to something we already know worked. And when Patrick and his buddies laugh at the idea of having no billionaires, they're ignoring the fact that the middle class is getting crushed while wealth gets sucked upward into the hands of a tiny few. I am not saying we need to copy the 50s exactly, but maybe, just maybe, we should look at what worked back then and ask why we stopped doing it. So let me know what you think. Are you with Sam on this, or do you think Patrick and his crew made the stronger case? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I seriously read all of them. And if you're new here, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and help me keep this thing growing. Got plenty more content coming soon. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.